container. So for our project, we wanted to see if the ENACT method actually works. So it was to do the 3 workshops, follow the firms that were doing it, and then evaluate if the method is actually working. So the goal really of the study is to really evaluate the ability to assess the ethical risk assessment, because we wanted to separate the difference between the method in itself and how the project as a whole is working. So for the context, how it's being done is the 3 workshops inside a firm, and then they would choose one AI project that they were working on, or rather a case study, and then we would see through the 3 workshops if they would actually be able to do ethical AI risk assessment. So the main goal was really to see the validation of this methodology, because as you have seen, people have worked very hard for this methodology, and we want to see in action how it really works. And then if the stakeholders, the participants, the facilitators, and the firms really, when they actually have this methodology, actually use it, and then if they actually perceive a result for themselves. And then finally, if it can actually be scaled to the Norwegian context. So how we collected data, it was through questionnaires and observational data. So before the workshop, we did some small questionnaires to see the level of, for example, ethical literacy, have some data on the participants, know what their job, how much they work with AI. And then during the workshops, we would have a team of researchers in the case study to see how the process actually is implemented. Then we can have some other data that would be very hard to capture if we only did questionnaires. Then after the workshops, we wanted to understand how they perceived how it's being the process and if they appreciate it. So a bit more on the observational data, because it can seem weird that if you have a workshop and you see people writing while you're actually doing the process. But for us, it was really a way to see the interactions between the participants and the facilitators, and if, for example, the information we gave before was useful, and if the process in itself could be steered in the right way while they were doing it themselves. So after all this data, we have to integrate it and then analyze it to really see how it's being used. So with the more interesting part, the first results we're getting is that having this values-first perspective is really different than the other risk assessment that the participants have done. Because a lot of participants would be, I don't know, in IT security or other governance, so they would know how to do risk assessment, but doing it with an ethical lens and really being, for example, being all agreed on what is an ethical value, what is the value of the organization, it was really hard. So the first workshop, you would see that they would take some time to really understand the terminology, how it's being used, and how it can be then implemented for an ethical AI risk assessment. But then, on the other side, what really got out is that it's really important, the security aspect, that's what they really told us, and the privacy, and also the inclusion, because one of the participants are from NAV, so they were, for example, had much different perspective from the NBA, but as a whole, you could see that the same themes would come out as they would do the methodology. But what's also important is that because there were so many different perspectives, it did create tensions during the workshops. And it was the role of the facilitators to really guide them to follow the methodology, because if you don't agree, you can't actually do the risk assessment afterwards. So that was really important. And the facilitators, in my opinion, were really good in that sense that they were able to make the participants follow the methodology. And more on the terminology and the values aspect, it seemed to me very a double-edged sword, because at first it helped them really think about it more in an ethical perspective. So that was very, very important and good for the rest of the implementation and the rest of the process. However, sometimes they would get bogged down on the definitions and not really understand what really is an ethical value or ethical AI. So in that sense, it was useful, but sometimes it would slow down the process, and sometimes didn't have time to finish the whole methodology. They were also, surprisingly, in my opinion, very positive about the scalability of this methodology. So they would say that even though we don't use this in our other risk assessment, this would be useful for other projects that we have. And that to me was a good preliminary finding in the sense that they perceive this tool to be useful in other contexts than the specific case study that they had. And then finally, it's important to mention that the difference between the first workshop and the second workshop on the terminology aspect was hard for some participants when they didn't participate in the first one, but they would participate in the second and the third one. So in that sense, as we refine the tool, it's going to be important to really see how it's going to be able to follow the teams as they go, even if they might change, to really match the organizational realities of firms. And then, so for our next steps, we have done the full 3 workshops with NAV, and then we have the full 3 with DNV this Friday. Then after that, these were very big organizations, so in the next steps, it's going to be interesting to see maybe the startups and the smaller firms, how they perceive this methodology. And after this done, it's supposed to be done around October, but we should have the data analysis this fall, and hopefully more interesting results for you pretty soon. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions.
Da har vi en åpen spørsmålsrunde til alle som har. Kan dere velge om dere vil komme frem, eller jeg kan komme ned med mikrofonen, eller om dere bare vil kanskje såpass få at det mulig å spørre direkte, men ja. Alle kommentarer, kritikk, spørsmål. Ja, da Janne, skal du starte?
Say, I know that, Natalia, you have participated in the workshops during the autumn and now during the spring. And I wonder a little bit like, what would you say that are the top strengths of the ENACT methodology? And now, and the same question also for you, Benjamin, participating during the, like, from your perspective, what are the top strengths, top three strengths of the methodology?
I can maybe start. I think since I'm a PhD and this process of discovering and learning is very fluid, I began with actually principle approach to AI, and I thought we need to translate these principles into practice, and this is possible. But then, the more you learn, and then when you're part of such an empirical project, you realize that some things are just impossible in practice, and that's fine. So what I now ended up with this like virtue perspective, developing of character, developing of skills, developing of this sense of ethical responsibility or ethical morality. There are like different names of it. So I think the strength is that it was amazing because I was at the kickoff meeting like 2 years ago, and then I met everyone and everyone presented their use cases. And then you can see these people talking about the same things or the same AI solution in this like longitudinal perspective, and people change. People who are part of this project are top ethical stars. Like they know so much, they can share so much, and this all happens gradually, but it actually works. Engaging in these conversations, being a part of this co-creative processes actually creates so much value for these people who are part of it. And I've seen these changes all like throughout this time, and I'm looking forward to where we're going to end up. But I feel the main strength of the methodology, it gets you to reflect, it gets you to be a part of the process, and it gets you to include so many perspectives that it's extremely democratic, it's extremely inclusive, and it gets to develop this ethical character, which we all need in these difficult times of, such quite a disruptive but very useful technology. So that would be my answer.
building up on this, I think it was really interesting to see that at the beginning of the workshop, sometimes people who were from different levels, so they wouldn't speak the same way, but towards the end of the workshop, they would be more open to really share their real opinions about these ethical aspects. And that to me was really important throughout this process. And also, what I felt was really good is that the facilitators had a lot of leeway on how they would direct the participants, and that was useful because when you first receive this methodology, it seems so big, so you have to follow like a book, but no, you can actually, through this workshop, follow what is really important, and you see what people really follow on. Yeah.
I also want to add one thing, because one of the participant organizations, we had a workshop like number 1, number 2, and of course some people come on the first one and they don't come on the second one, or vice versa. But then when you see these people who've been at the first one and then they come on the second one, and the confidence they have, you know, sharing with other participants, oh yeah, this is bias, this is unethical. They, you know, they have this vocabulary, and it's like it took us just an hour or two in the first workshop, and then they come with so much confidence and so much. They're ready to talk about these things, and this is not like, so it does work. So that's what I've observed, and I hope we'll be able to show it to more people in perspective. Yeah.
Okay.
That was the
Det er
question.
lov å snakke norsk, så
Ja.
også. Men ja.
Ja, hei, mitt navn er Margunn Onsdag, fra kollega med Diana og Jim på Institutt for informatikk. Men jeg skal spørre på engelsk. Thanks for the nice presentation, and I'm sure the workshop series have been useful for both for the researchers and the practitioners to create shared sense of what is ethical risk, what is AI, all of this. But like coming from outside, not knowing what you've done, it still sounds relatively high level and abstract what you discuss. So could you say a little bit more? Because in my experience, risk assessment has to become concrete. Like we have this data set, has these quality characteristics. We miss this kind of data. We want to use this algorithm. What is the bias risk in this case? So to become concrete. Can you say something how high level or concrete you've worked in the workshops?
Yeah. I can start. I think it's really common that we give this feedback, not from participants, but for everyone which we present this methodology to, is that of course people want numbers, people want a checklist, people want to know, are we doing the right thing or not? Because there is a lot like compliance, there is a lot of ENACT coming in, there are a lot of things that have to be in place. So of course people want this concrete, what are we getting out of this? But what we're trying to do, you know, ethics and values and all these things are quite, I mean, they're not abstract, but they are quite qualitative. You cannot count how much harm you will cause a child if you use AI evaluating this child in school, you know? The thing is, like, we want very tech-fixed solutions, which, in my opinion, do not work, or like, they work to a limited extent of time, but if you want a kind of a long perspective, we do need to work with these abstract things, and we do need to teach people how to think in these abstract high terms, because that's the whole, we need to develop literacy, we need to develop AI literacy, digital literacy, and we need to lift people up so they're able to discuss those things, not just in organizations, but even in schools and universities. So I understand that people want something extremely targeted and extremely concrete, but I still feel that we should push the boundaries of what we used to do and try something new. And I think that's what I find in this project, is that's what we're actually doing. So yeah, I hope that answers a bit, but this is also my perspective. So.
Skal vi Robine, vil du si noen ting nå?
Jeg kan bare legge
Ja.
til. I just wanted to add that there's always a use case. There's always a very concrete use case that is being discussed. I think that's an important detail. So it's never the overarching, we'll use some AI.
Yeah.
It's always this solution with these features, these data, etc.
Just continue on that note, because I think what the focus was and what we presented during another such event that we had before, And now I think Natalia has mentioned in her presentation as well, it was that we had the use case of transcription using AI Copilot as a transcription tool. So that was one of the focuses that we had as a concrete use case. So we chose this use case together with the other, like the organization, the partner organizations, and we concretely focused on that at least during the autumn. When we conducted cross-sectorial workshops. So that made it very concrete, so we could take that use case, and of course it may have different implications for, depending on which organizations you are, and then we could, in a way, make it more abstract or generalized, but here to note is that we focus in this in Natalia's presentation and so on, we currently focus on the methodology, on the process, and not so much on the findings of what we found out from that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for your presentations, and it's really interesting to hear about the work that you're doing that I'm fairly unfamiliar with, so sorry if my question seems irrelevant. But I think, I mean, continuing with like these two last questions that we just heard, I think something that I think maybe we need to perhaps like think a bit more when we talk about like general ethics of AI is that there is obviously a lot of aspects that follow within that umbrella, but there is a lot that, in my opinion, just is talked about compliance and issues related to data and risk management of using certain types of data, right? With which, as researchers, I think we will be quite familiar with if we have worked with any kind of data and we had to fulfill GDPR compliance, right? The ethics part of that, at the human level, I think is very different from my perspective. And maybe because I'm a humanities person, or I work in language specifically, but I think that is obviously connected to all of this this sort of like data compliance and risk assessment and all of that, but I think that's a little bit different, and I do agree that that will depend from case to case. I do think we can study it and quantify it. Obviously, you need to start somewhere and then like have enough research and data to actually see the potential ethical risks of those things, but I do think it is possible. But I think we sometimes overuse the word ethical because it sounds good, but I don't think that we're always doing necessarily ethics. And we have like a philosopher here, so I would be interested in hearing your ideas about that. But it's just like a comment for a discussion rather than a criticism. I don't think is that, but it's really, really interesting to develop methodologies that can get us closer to those conversations and to getting that those solutions.
Okay, I can go after Leonora, you can go. But I think that was the goal of this methodology, is to really think more ethical by design, not seeing at the end, you have this AI, how can it be compliant, is to see, okay, we need to start from the beginning and see what is going to be the ethical issues. And that was one of the difficulties during the workshops, is that we don't have a shared understanding of what is the ethical values of our organization. So I think that, in that sense, this methodology helps in that way.
Yes.
Question of clarification, is the ENACT method, is it a practical method only so that they can find their own solutions, or is it also some normative guidance or influence on how you should go about to conclude?
It's a process-oriented tool, so this is what we try to do, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but try to offer a ready package methodology that organizations just can implement in practice. Just read, have a course, and then be ready to implement. So that's why it's such a cross-sectoral collaboration, because we try to understand, okay, how these organizations are talking about ethics, or how these organizations designing and developing solutions. Are they having this assessment before developing? Are they having it like already after the solution is being deployed? So I think the goal is to have this ready, tailored tool to Norwegian context. That's why all the organizations that are participating are based in Norway. But we also have some colleagues who work with that in Scandinavia, and I met some people in Helsinki and in Sweden, which is extremely interesting. That's I feel like Nordic countries are, in a way, doing this as assessment tools and these methodologies. So yeah, that would be my answer. I hope it answers the question.
It's meant as a tool, as
Yeah.
said, but it is of course always a danger when we put a tool out,
Yeah.
how it's used. But the idea is a tool.
Yeah.
More questions?